So my initial impressions of Logic Pro, I actually recorded a review yesterday and I was pretty harsh and decided to give it another go today where I would actually try to record a track. Is Logic Pro professional? It depends on what kind of producer you are and who you're asking, and also what their skill level is, because that has a huge spectrum of degrees that people categorize what professional is. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, for 90% of things that you need to do when it comes into recording audio, laying down MIDI, playing scales, getting plugins and stacking effects, doing very basic automation, this can actually accomplish quite a bit. And the M2 iPad, which is what I have, is beyond powerful enough to supply that. For my particular needs, I'm somebody that makes everything from scratch. I'm somebody that sound designs everything from scratch. I rely heavily on resampling and audio workflow. I really try to get everything into audio as fast as possible and then manipulate it and mangle it. That's where I think Logic falls short. Also, some of the procedures was as far as like resampling or sending recording audio from one track to another is a bit cumbersome. The exporting leaves a lot to be desired, and advanced automation, which would be touch writing with a third-party plugin or something. Say if I wanted to do automation by latching here, I have not been able to get that to work. It could be a bug from third-party effects. It does work with first-party effects, so there's that. So I wouldn't call this track quote-unquote professional or anything, but after about 4 hours of stumbling around, this is what I managed to come up with. So I don't think that was anything amazing, but at the same time, I was able to accomplish making a very simple beat, and I was able to kind of cut audio up and do some, relatively basic warping and stuff. But some of the major issues that I have with this is just the overall approach to audio manipulation in the first place. You do have an inspector control over on the left, but in order for you to like mess with anything, I guess let's talk about basic functions first. If I wanted to duplicate and variate or make changes to or whatever, I have to click on this and then click on it again. You'll notice that there's no duplicate. You have to go to edit and then go to repeat region. So some of the terminology is kind of like odd. The other thing as well is that you have flux and follow on here, and unless if you turn this off, as you'll see, you can't reverse anything. So you have to have something on there in order for you to be able to duplicate and whatnot, to be able to do certain functions of audio manipulation that really drive me bonkers. The other thing is that if you have long cuts of audio, which some people categorize as mud pies, I say sound design gems or whatever. Let's say you've got a section right here, you can't do scrubbing. Now, what's interesting is on the editor here, this is just a zoomed in version of the actual timeline. So it's the exact same thing. So what that basically means is whatever you move on here or whatever is going to affect the actual project, and that I don't like that. The other thing is that you can't scrub the audio within a clip. There's no way to do it, at least as far as I know. I looked it up on the manual and I could not find it, and that's not very helpful. Now, what is somewhat okay is when you get into cutting, but you're going to see that you have several different steps in order to actually cut something, where of course I'm used to a keyboard which would just be like Command E or something in Bitwig. I have to go to split, then I have to pull this up, but you'll see here that the cut thing will pop up, but I won't be able to move it unless if I move the playhead here, and then I can cut it. So if I want to move this over, it's very cumbersome to grab and to drag and stuff. So I have to go over here, then click on where I want to do that. And when it comes into like snapping and stuff, this will go into 1 out of 64 beats max. And then after that, you have to turn snap to grid off. So you could do it, but again, it's just like so many steps in order to get to what you actually want. That time it actually let me scroll, but if you have Snap on, it will. Now it's letting me do it. I don't know. Sometimes it's just weird. The playback is a huge issue for me because if you have something on loop, then every time you hit play, it's going to play to the loop, and I think that's just ridiculous. Um, I do not like that whatsoever. I would like to be able to loop a particular section and maybe lead up to the loop, or know that I'm like, whenever I'm in Bitwig, or even when I was in Ableton, I'd have something looped to know as a placeholder where I'm working. But if I'm trying to go and cut audio and then pull it back into that loop that I'm working on, I lose my playhead. And then because I'm losing my playhead, it means I got to go fish for this little intricate stuff in the first place. And so it doesn't really encourage me to be able to cut stuff up, and I have to like do some mental gymnastics and like memorize waveforms and stuff to be able to figure out what it is that I'm actually doing. So when it comes into resampling and stuff, there's actually a couple of options that might even be better in some cases than Bitwig in specific use cases. For example, if I were to, hold on one second, if I were to go into something kind of like bounce in place on here, then what you can do, which is actually pretty sick, is you can bounce this with the effects. So if you go bounce and join, you go bounce in place, you'll see that you can actually include the effects. And then you can either replace it. If it's in MIDI, there are no hybrid tracks, so you have to go to a new track. But if you're on the same one, then you can continue to replace samples or something over time. Now, something that's kind of whack as well is the library. For one, you can't pull in, or like there's no way to connect your sample folder. I have just everything in my files. So the workaround to that is you have to come out of this, go into your files here, click on this thing and go to slide over. And now if you pull up Logic again, then you can go through your samples and then be able to drag stuff in. The problem with this, that a lot of other YouTubers have said, is that you can't drag stuff out. And so what I have figured out, which I've got some videos on and I'll briefly cover, is you can actually put an instance of Koala effects on that, and then what you can do is just set a pad to record and then save that into your hard drive. That's been the easiest way that I've figured out how to do that. When it comes into resampling within the DAW, what you have to do is you have to create a bus, and this is pretty much like the overall like routing approach to Logic as a whole, which I think is super archaic. You can't like take the output of one audio track into the input of another audio track. You have to send it to a bus. If you want to do side chaining more than one track at a time, you got to send it to a bus, as opposed to just grouping or doing what they call as like a track sum or something like that. Sum stack or something, flatten stack. What we can do is go to this. But yeah, it's called like a stack or something of the sort. And that's just kind of like, what is the point of having a group if you've got all these different versions of this? I don't really understand it. I do have a template, which, speaking of templates, in order for you to save a template, you have to save a project. And then anytime you want to use that template, you have to duplicate that project and then start working on that to rename it, which blows. It would be nice to be able to kind of just have a default thing that opens, so that way I don't have to set up another sidechain routing thing or put a clipper on the master or something. And it's not that complicated, but it's just, you know what I mean, some inconvenient things as a whole. This thing has crashed on me several times. If you watch my live streams of me working with this, both trying to make music and then also just making sounds, it crashes on me quite a bit. I don't necessarily know if that's because of Logic or because of compatibility issues with the AUV3s. It is what it is. Just be mindful of that. As far as a means of actually doing sound design, you can pretty much do a lot. With a caveat, this has this has 0 modulators, so no LFOs, no envelope generators, nothing of the sort. Everything has to be confined into what you have here, and that's why you see me using a bunch of third-party effects. That being said, because you can have virtually unlimited effects, or at least I haven't run into any limitations yet, you can make some pretty sick sounds. I made a neurobass in here, and it sounds like this. And And so with that, that's pretty cool. But the thing with this is that I could do this in Drambo as well, and I have done it in Drambo as well. And it's actually easier to record because there's this little thing that you just click on the top that goes record, and then it saves to your samples. So, what can you say? So with that, I think that if Logic can improve on a lot of workflow aspects, because it's definitely powerful enough. This isn't like a technology issue. This is strictly a limitation of design. I think that, and especially like with the utilization of the Apple Pencil or something, right? So if I can just push on the little button and then that brings up a slice tool and I can just be like, boom, 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 that would be amazing. Or if I could double tap it and that way I can move stuff over, or maybe I can reverse. Maybe if I could customize the toolbar up top to where I, can have like a quick reverse thing. I don't get why if you warp a clip that you can't reverse it. That makes no sense to me. And then also you can't automate like pitch. You have to pretty much like you have to use the fade in order to ramp up or to speed up is what they call it, or slow down. And so like it's just so backwards to me why all this stuff or how all this stuff works, and it's a very weird approach that I don't vibe with, long story short. But I will say that if you have some clever approaches to how you're making your loops in the first place, to where maybe you're just throwing audio in that's already, ready to go. All of the stuff that I made on this project, I made from scratch through a MudPie. So this is a makeshift kick that if you look at my effects chain on here, this wasn't even supposed to be a kick, and then I made something out of it. Same thing with the snare, the bass, and the musical thing was intentional. But if you're not trying to do that, then you can definitely craft beats and stuff. And then keep in mind that you can always use third-party VSTs or AUV3s in order to, get a kit or something going or have pre-made stuff. But my expectations for this, well, to be fair, I didn't really have any expectations for this, but I am let down by this by quite a bit because I actually need something to be able to edit audio with. And that's one of the biggest things that iPad as a whole is missing. Is there's Cubases, I guess, which I'm not really sure how the audio like workflow environment is in that, because I don't want to spend $50 on it. And I think that Nano Studio 2 only has also MIDI. But yeah, it's just so backwards how you approach this. And like I said, I just don't vibe with it as a whole. So it's not a bad DAW. It's not necessarily unusable. And I think that, like I said, for 90% of use cases, you'll be able to get what you need done in this. But if you're somebody like me that makes, neuro halftime music where I synthesize everything from scratch and doing constant resamples, where I'm trying to create a very fast workflow of, this sounds like crap, so I'm gonna do some stuff to it real quick to make it better, and then feed it back in, and then move the audio over here, do some like crazy cutting and this and that. It really makes me appreciate Bitwig and Ableton as a whole. But as long as you're not doing that, then you can actually get quite a bit done with this. The last thing that I'll say is I'm very disappointed in not even necessarily the price, but the subscription model. There's so many things these days that are trying to make you subscribe to them. And if you look at all of the plugins that are available, even on iPad, they're like, we want you to subscribe. It's just a couple bucks a month. It's just a couple bucks a month. And suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, man. Like, I don't have any of these subscriptions, by the way, because I'm totally against it. And I'm not going to be subscribing to Logic Pro unless if they do a major turnaround with the things that I need met. This is being filmed after this neuro-based video, if you haven't watched that yet. But just as a means of coming to conclusions, the subscription model is bogus, man. I don't vibe with it. I'd much rather than charge $200 for updates that are going to last you for 2 years, which is going to end up being more expensive than a subscription, or at least offering that as a choice, than having to remember that you got to pay $50 every year, and throwing it in the back of your mind until you're hit and you're like, why am I missing $50 from my account? Because not everybody's made of money, even though iPads are expensive. I understand that's a whole different thing in the first place. So it's really amazing, long story short, because you can essentially create everything or I can essentially create everything that I would want to make on the computer as far as a sound design means. But for workflow approach and for the way that I choose to be creative, and notice I say choose, not the way that I have to be creative, but the way that I have become accustomed to making music, Logic Pro does not cater to that for me. And I have a feeling that if you make drum and bass or IDM or like glitch music, right? Like the nerd zone of making music, you're going to have a hard time with this. So I know that I didn't cover all the features, but I just wanted to give you a perspective from somebody that I wouldn't call myself a professional music maker. I have been doing this for almost 10 years, but I know my stuff and I know sound design really well, and I know what it means to actually create a beginning, middle, and end as far as a composition. So hopefully this was helpful. If you guys have any questions about anything, or if there's anything that I might have missed that you want me to talk about or create a discussion about, I really want to have a chat with this. So I would like to get a bunch of buzz around here, and I'm hoping to see some changes with the way that audio is being treated within Logic Pro for iPad. So thank you guys so much. Please like the video, and if you want to support me, alckemy.com, book a lesson with me, become a member, and let me know what you want to see next, because I love doing reviews for iPad software because it's, I don't know, it's really fun. So thanks guys. I'll see you in the next one.